Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stluke'sonline.org.
In collaboration with Boise State Public Radio, the Community Library presents a new podcast, Sheep Stories. I'm host Vance Cunningham. Join me as we listen through the archives of the Trailing of the Sheep Festival to learn about the Scottish, Basque, and Peruvian immigrants foundational to the sheep herding industry over the past century. Hear their stories of traveling to Idaho and learning the language of the sheep. Find Sheep Stories wherever you get your podcasts and at boisestatepublicradio.org.
More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudette. Have you ever had your flight canceled or delayed? Well, some of those happen because there are simply not enough pilots in the United States. Some say the shortage is severe and will only get worse as more pilots age out of the industry and it gets harder to replace them. That's just one of the reasons the Gem State chapter of Women in Aviation International is holding Girls in Aviation Day this Saturday, September 20th in Boise. Now, the other big reason is to show girls that there are all kinds of jobs in the aviation industry that might be the right fit for them. Serena Larson is a pilot and a first officer with Southwest Airlines and the founding president of the Gem State chapter of Women in Aviation. And Caitlin Koppel is a student pilot and a member of the chapter, and they are here to tell us more. I want to welcome both of you to the program.
Thanks for
having me. So, Serena, let me start the conversation with you. Why did you want to become a pilot?
I was introduced to aviation as a teenager, just kind of by chance, and I fell in love with it. I went up for an airplane ride. My dad's friend took me up, and I just really fell in love with the view and the freedom involved. I didn't know at the time that I was going to become a pilot. For me, it seemed like a job that, wasn't an opportunity for me. But eventually I did get a job in high school at the local airport and learned a little bit more about aviation and ended up going to college for it. And it was a risk that I took that worked out really well for me. And the pilot job is one that I can recommend for anyone.
So, Serena, as you mentioned, you said, you didn't think it was necessarily a job for you. Does that have to do with the fact that, even nowadays, it's rare to see female pilots? I fly fairly often, and I would say probably 8 times out of 10, the pilots are male. So if you're not seeing that, do you know if that's a job for you or not?
Yeah, exactly. You're spot on. We have currently only about 5% of airline transport pilots are female, and that's a stark different contrast from a lot of other STEM careers that are growing pretty, or at least more rapidly. STEM careers in general are struggling, but aviation struggles specifically. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that it's kind of a non-traditional path. There's not always a college degree involved. There's not always a bachelor's degree that you need to get. It's a different type of training. And so I think sometimes that's part of it. But I think also there's just always been very little representation of women. I think since World War II, when the airlines took off, it's always been military men that filled those roles, and women were not really invited to that until much later. And now we are looking at kind of a lack of female representation, and that makes a difference. I think when women see people in that role, or when young girls see people in that role, it makes a huge difference. And that's one of the reasons that we focus so much on this Girls in Aviation Day that we're doing on Saturday.
So, Caitlin, let me bring you to the conversation. Tell us why you decided you wanted to learn how to fly.
Well, like a lot of people, or maybe not a lot of people, I had a 40th birthday bucket list, and learning how to fly a plane was on it. And so I took a discovery flight in June. I think it was before, it was actually, it was June of my 40th year. So I was about to turn 41. And I just fell in love with it. I did it out in Caldwell. And just loved the views, loved learning about how all of the instruments work and watching a pilot in action. Because when you're flying commercially, you don't really get to see all the things that are going into flying a plane, especially landing a plane. And so I started my training at Glass Cockpit Aviation here in Boise last October and just did my solo flight, my first solo flight yesterday. And I just love it.
Oh, wow. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Serena, you mentioned your journey was that you ended up going to college for it. But as you also said, it's not necessarily a traditional path. Can you talk a little bit about the training when it comes to being a pilot? Because it's not easy, and a lot of times it is not cheap, even if you go to a college, specifically to become a pilot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, I would say the majority of people in aviation are there because they know somebody that was in the industry, their parents or a pilot, their uncles are pilots, and they were kind of led down that path. It is, like you said, not a cheap endeavor. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money. It's similar to what you might consider for a doctor. A degree is no longer required for pilots, and that's why I mentioned sometimes, there's a degree involved, sometimes not.
Mm-hmm.
With the huge pilot demand, a lot of airlines relaxed that requirement actually. And so now currently it's not a said requirement, although the more competitive the industry gets, that may come back as well. But the training really is a series of pilot certificates that one gets, starting with a private pilot and working their way up through a commercial pilot. After that, you go on and you usually have to build some hours before you go to the airlines. And that is often done through flight instructing or other jobs in small aircraft tours or skydiving pilots, things like that, before you get enough experience to go to the airlines. And it does cost a lot. I was lucky in that I didn't come from a family with anybody that was in aviation. And I earned a scholarship to go to college. And without that scholarship, I wouldn't have made it there. I really wouldn't have gone. So for me, having that scholarship meant everything, which is another reason that I started this chapter here in Boise is to give back and to really kind of show young girls that there are opportunities for scholarships and there is a place for them in the industry.
And there are estimates that about 18,000 airline and commercial pilot jobs will open up in the next 10 years. And there will be a shortage of 30,000 pilots by 2032. That's not very far away. Serena, talk to us about what's causing this shortage, but then also, the need for more pilots.
Yeah, certainly. A part of the reason for this shortage is retirement. If you backtrack to 40 years ago when a lot of the pilots joined the industry, those pilots are all retiring now, and so there is a large number of retirements going on. But at the end of the day, the demand is still there. We are still seeing such a huge demand in air travel and air transportation and cargo. And as the globalization of the world continues to increase, that's only going to get more and more. So, but the problem I think too is that we only have about half of the population. When you look at the fact that only 5% of pilots are female. And even 20%, if you look at the entire aviation industry, only about 20% of the aviation industry is female. So, I think it would do good for everybody to get, the rest of the population involved. We want the most fair and the most safe pilots. And I think we're missing out on a lot of the population by not or kind of failing to include those people.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit more about the Women in Aviation International because, Serena, you founded the Gem State chapter, and my understanding is that this is a worldwide program. And I know one of the goals is to inspire girls to find careers in aviation and aerospace that goes beyond just pilots. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Women in Aviation International has been around since the early 70s, I think. It is a worldwide program. We have, I think, over 200 chapters worldwide. And the focus is on inspiring girls, but also just inspiring the next generation of the aviation industry. And so that's going to include pilots, air traffic controllers, dispatchers. We have emergency response people. We have engineers. We have drone pilots now. There's a myriad of aviation uh, industry jobs that are open for females, and a lot of people don't really consider those. And then, I mean, we always want to build a strong, informed pipeline of employees, and I think, need to reach more people to do that.
So, Caitlin, what would you tell, young girls, young women who maybe haven't even thought about this as a career opportunity?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not necessarily looking at it as a career opportunity, but just a really fun hobby since I'm a business owner in town. But I think, as growing up, I never saw myself being a pilot. I never really saw women pilots in the cockpit of any of the trips that I maybe took with my family. And as someone who flies frequently now, gosh, I mean, 8 out of 10 would be, I think, probably generous. I feel like it might be even 9 or it's very rare to see a woman in the cockpit, and I think that's a problem. I think we all want our girls to be able to be anything that they can dream to be in the world, and aviation is a part of that. I know for me personally, there's nothing more empowering than being able to literally land a plane. It is the coolest feeling, and it took me about 100 tries to be able to do it, but now that I can, it's really awesome and just so empowering.
And Serena, I have just a bit less than a minute left with you. I know last year Aviation Day had 30,000 girls come out to learn about a career in aviation worldwide. So tell us about this Saturday. How can people find out more information and come out to the event?
Yeah, so this is our kind of our event that we do every year that we really, really focus on. Last year we had over 100 girls at Jackson Jet Center for this event. This year we're expecting over 200. We've had a lot of really great community support from Jackson Jet Center to Boise Airport, the local flight schools. And so the event is going to be from 10 to 2. Everybody's invited. It's aimed at girls age 8 to 18. And the opportunity is just to show them that they can see themselves in these roles. There's going to be female pilots there. There's female operators. And, we really want them to be able to just look at the world a little bit differently and see some of those careers as opportunities. We have some STEM activities. We have an exhibit hall with some local companies that come and are represented. And then we have on the ramp at the airport, we'll have static aircraft displays and vehicle displays.
Well, I want to thank you all so much. We've been speaking with Serena Larson, a pilot and first officer with Southwest Airlines and the founding president of the Gem State chapter of Women in Aviation, along with Caitlin Koppel, a student pilot and a member of the chapter, talking about their annual Girls in Aviation Day, which will be this Saturday in Boise at the Jackson Jet Center. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.